Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thanks for downloading another episode of Wigs for Wigs. I'm Joe Cook, and I'm joined once again by our political panel, educator Bill Venezia, Judge Ed DeFazio, and Dr. Michael Buxbaum. We are recording this on the 5th of March, 2026. A lot has happened since we recorded just about a week ago. This is the shortest break we've had between episodes in quite a while, but no shortage of things that happened between when we last came together and now coming together once again. We were previewing what might happen with Iran. It was one of the stories we said we were looking for over the next couple of weeks when we last met, which was right after President Trump's State of the Union. And boy, things have happened with Iran since we last met. The United States and Israel have carried out strikes against the country. In one of those strikes, the Ayatollah of Iran was killed, the longtime leader of Iran, although some of the leaders of our country seem to be confusing him with the original Ayatollah. They do have similar names, but he wasn't there for that whole time. But we'll certainly talk about that. We'll talk about how that's going, what that looks like going forward. And I'm sure we'll say apologies to the debt crisis again, but, we did bomb Iran this week. So maybe we could tie the debt into that somehow, but I don't think that's going to be our focus today. So I'm going to go around, let everybody give their initial thoughts on what's happening with Iran and everything else. We'll start with Bill and take it away, Bill.
Well, I think it's an illegal war. Congress wasn't consulted. There was some GOP congressman. He cherry-picked the Senate, to get that vote. But even that, the senators basically said, if we put boots on the ground, all bets are off. And yet it's not brought up to the Congress, I guess, because he controls the Speaker of the House. And I don't think that it would pass there. There's still a lot of noise politically over it. I find this whole adventure, folly. I really think that this could have been handled diplomatically by bringing China in, because China has got more to lose than maybe we have in terms of they were the biggest purchaser of Iranian oil and natural gas. And if the straits close, it's going to impact China as much as Europe and the rest of the world. I also see one other unintended consequence, that it benefits Russia. You noticed how Russia backed away from its ally, Iran, because it knows that the price of oil, which is already skyrocketed and heading to $200 a barrel, basically helps him fuel his own war. And he's threatening to cut the spigots off for Europe, for both natural gas and oil. It's just a sad state of affairs. I do see a bright spot. I do see an off-ramp, because I don't think it'll get more unpopular with the American public, and polling is supporting that currently, if we put boots on the ground, which I think is an untenable thing to do, to control a country that's twice the size of Afghanistan and Iraq together. So I really do think it's going to impact Trump a great deal, especially in the midterms.
Yes, well, I have a very different take on it than Billy. First of all, when people say there was no need for it, the fact is that Iran was developing nuclear weapon. And even though Trump said that we all obliterated them, first of all, we know that Trump lies. And even in June of 2025, there were a number of people who say we set it back only a few months. And there is that 500 or 700 kilos of highly enriched uranium, which is somewhere, which seemingly nobody knows where. And there was evidence, and in fact, Israel has bombed it recently, that they started digging new facility in order to keep doing it. Secondly, Iran encourages this demonstration where they call death to Israel, death to America. We are considered the great Satan. Israel is considered the little Satan. And I just found out, listening to some news, that on the 4th of November, in Iran, they have a Death to America Day, which is a national holiday. And during that national holiday, they burn American flags as well as whoever is the president at that time, because that started right after the revolution of 79. So I think they are a major threat, not only to USA, but also to the whole world. It's a fundamentalist Islamic regime, and the whole point of that regime is to spread Islam and jihad all over the world. They are also the largest sponsor of terrorism. So I think now that Iran has been weakened significantly, mainly because of the October 7th, as well as after the so-called Midnight Hammer, it is time to take them out. Now, one thing I do agree with Billy, that we do not know what's going to happen. Obviously, in my wildest dreams, I hope that the Islamist government will fall apart through the continued bombing and taking out of their leaders, and there will be another government, which probably will not be a democracy, but maybe one of the generals of the Iranian army will take over, but he or she, well, not she in this case, he will be more kind of aligned with the United States and maybe Israel and look more at pragmatic solutions rather than this idea of martyrdom and Islamizing the whole world. So I think we have to be very careful that if the regime does not fall apart after, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks of bombing, we just say we declare victory in a sense that we degraded them militarily, and I think we will, and then leave. Certainly, I agree that there should be no boots on the ground. And, if we are able to leave with kind of a declaration of victory, or at least degrading Iran to the point is that they pose no threat at this time, then I think it would have been a very positive situation.
I do have a few questions I want to pose to everybody to kind of guide this, but I want the judges' initial thoughts first before I get into that.
Well, I'll keep my initial thoughts brief. I think the most disturbing thing right now is the constant misrepresentations and confusion in messaging that comes out of the administration. It's not doing us any good. You still don't really know. We don't know why this war started when it did. Although I think in large part it started when it did because they had the intelligence as to where the Ayatollah was with his top echelon, and they took them all out. It would have started anyway, but I'm just very disappointed in the mixed messages and the confusion. And I will say this, there's no way that there are going to be troops put on the ground in Iran. That's not going to happen, in my opinion.
Well, that actually leads me to my first question I wanted to pose to all of you and just get your thoughts on, which is, if our objective, at least one of our primary objectives, no matter how much they want to claim it's not, if our objective in Iran is regime change, can regime change, sustained regime change, really be brought about and maintained by air power alone? Don't you have to have a presence on the ground to make that happen the way we want it to happen?
No, I think history teaches you that the more you bomb, the more you basically incur the resistance of your enemy. That happened to Vietnam. It basically, the more we bombed, the more basically the North Vietnamese resisted. Westmoreland and Johnson kept calling for more troops because you definitely need troops on the ground, and that was an utter folly. I think there are more parallels to Vietnam than to this, because there was in the Iraq War, there was a mission statement as to why we were there and how we were going to prosecute it. It was done in a professional manner. This is not. I mean, there's no set mission. There's no set procedures. The vice president was out of the loop with this. He's persona non grata because he was against this. He wasn't even in the war room. I believe that when that school was bombed, and the targets are all over the map. They're decimating Iran, and we have the capacity to do that. But I do think that works against us, and I do think it causes the need for boots on the ground, and how this gang who can't shoot straight. And by the way, Michael, we were cost $100 million with Kuwaiti shooting down those 3 planes. And thank God the pilot survived. You know, those of you that are worried about the budget, which is going to explode. And currently, we're depleting our stocks of armaments, which makes us vulnerable in other areas. So I definitely see these fools putting boots on the ground, and I think that is going to be the end of this when we get into a quagmire, because we are creating hundreds and thousands of new terrorists. And, Europe is going to suffer. We're going to suffer. The Middle East is going to suffer as a result of this.
Well, just to go back to Joe's question, I think it will basically, whether it can be done from the air will very much depend on the Iranian people. Is there going to be someone, as I said earlier, who will organize resistance, and that person will have to have some kind of military force behind them? Because if people just come out to the streets in millions, they can be just mowed down by the Revolutionary Guard. So it will have to be someone who is currently a general or has support and is willing to take over and has enough military behind him. Now, can it be done through air? For example, in Libya, it did happen. We bombed Libya and there was a change of regime, not necessarily for the better, but certainly Gaddafi was killed by other Libyan group. So it has been done. Also, I would say that the nature of war is very different now. We have we don't really have much carpet bombings anymore, and the drones and missiles are very precise. So it's the beginning of targeting individuals whom you want to target as opposed to wiping out general population. And as far as we know, only about 1,700 Iranians have been killed, which is very little, civilians, which is very little compared to their population of 90 million. As far as the school, we don't even know yet whether it was done by us by mistake. I mean, certainly I don't believe for a second that we would have intended to do it, but we don't know if was done as a collateral casualty by mistake, or whether it was done by the regime to elicit sympathy, because that's all they have. They are only hope. If Iran is going to win, they are hoping that the media will start looking at various children's bodies and it will ignite anger in the West. So we don't know that, and that remains to be continued.
But you brought up Libya, where it did work, us simply using air power, but that was in concert with an ongoing armed revolution by Libyans. That is not happening right now in Iran. So I guess I'm just wondering, because it's a slightly different situation. Can air power alone achieve what we're trying to achieve in Iran?
Yeah, it's very different. And I mean, again, it will depend. Is there going to be an organized opposition to the current regime?
We destroyed. Well, first of all, we told Iranians to stay in their houses and basically, shelter in place while this was going on. But they said, Trump is exhorting the people to basically, revolt. Well, we had a mechanism to get messages to the Iranian people. It was called Voice of America. But the Trump administration, in their usual short-sightedness, did away with the Voice of America. And, in a way, it was probably a good idea, because the Voice of America used to espouse our values around the world, democratic values. And now that was silenced. So now you're telling these people who are facing this bombing to come out and revolt. And you want to replace the Ayatollah with a military dictator. God damn, we're in a bad place for democracy.
Well, okay. Voice of America. But speaking of about short-sightedness, I mean, there was also the story that came out that Kash Patel, just a few days before the bombing of Iran, fired a bunch of people in the FBI who were in charge of counter-intelligence, counter-Iranian, specifically, activities in the United States. So I I would love to pile on Kash Patel because we kind of left our last episode talking about Kash Patel. But I want to come back to the judge because my next question actually relates to what he was saying in his initial thoughts, which is that one of the principles of war taught to our military officers, preached by our military doctrine, is the principle of objective, that what you do should be aimed at a specific goal, that you shouldn't just do things just to do things. And this comes back to what you were saying earlier about the messaging. But what exactly is our objective? I'm not really clear because that should determine what we're actually doing in Iran.
The objective appears to be whatever most convenient on the day. And I mean that. I am so frustrated listening to what comes out of the mouth of our Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of War.
No, I know. That's why I specifically said Secretary of Defense.
By statute, his title.
The way that guy speaks in such a cavalier manner, in my opinion, about what is going on and the loss of American lives and the potential loss of more American lives and the expenditure of money. And I know really we shouldn't talk about money too much in this context, but it's a problem. All right. But and I agree 100%, Joe, we have no idea really what is the end game. We said this early on. What's the end game? And we all agree, I think, that Iran has been a very, very serious problem for not only us, but a large part of the world for 2 generations. And unfortunately, I think that we are not going to be able to deal with whoever comes in as the leader of Iran. I'm very worried that we're really getting ourselves boxed in, and we're probably going to have, we may very well have in the weeks ahead a mission accomplished moment. All right. And we're going to say everything is over and that's it. Just like that. It's going to be just like that. It's going to come to an end. All right. Because, and I just want to add this one thing. I don't think that we can expect the Iranian people to rise up. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't like to say that, but I don't think it is, because they can't in large part. But I don't think it's happening.
Well, you made a little George W. Bush comparison there, and we were kind of joking before we came on recording that I think I'm a bigger George W. Bush fan than the rest of the panel here. But when he had that banner, mission accomplished, obviously we know how it all worked out. Not going to go back and completely relitigate Iraq, but they had a clear objective that was defined to the American people. The justification obviously turned out problematic, the idea of the weapons of mass destruction. But the objective was to remove Saddam Hussein from power and try to bring about democracy in Iraq. And that was accomplished when George W. Bush did his PR stunt on the Air Force carrier. That Saddam Hussein was removed from power, as we sought to do. It was clearly spelled out to the American people that that was what we were trying to do, right? They put months in to telling the American people what is going on in Iraq, what we hope to accomplish there. Yes, the justification, there's problematic intelligence they relied on. I'm not going to try to defend that part, but they put in the work. Right? That was a professional administration that went to the United Nations with Colin Powell, who's somebody I really look up to personally, who spelled out the reasoning and the objective. We want to get rid of Saddam Hussein. That work has not been put in by the Trump administration. And Bill, I know you were the one kind of saying that as we were talking before we came on to record. So I guess I'll go to you first with that. Why won't this administration put in the work to tell us what they're doing?
I don't know what drives their ideology. I think I've read some stuff about the Bible and
I want to come to that next, but
coming to Armageddon, and it's crazy to think that this would be motivation to go to war. The war effort is basically going to make a destabilized country, which would be rife, just like Iraq was, for terrorist factions, and to move in and to make a bad situation worse. And without any kind of viable plan, which this is like the gang that couldn't shoot straight. I want to bring one other thing to it, Joe, and this is like an aside. Of all the allies, that supposed allies we have you noticed who's staying out of this? Saudi Arabia. Trump's good friends who have enriched him and his son-in-law. And they refuse to let us use their air bases because they're petrified of what the impact is going to be against them. And I find that very, very interesting. And who's going to profit the most? Saudi oil. So it's despicable that, like Stalin did in the 30s, purging generals, we've purged anybody that basically has any military competency. And, we're relying on Hedgepeth, who scares the heck out of me. And especially with his news conferences. I think if anything the administration should do is muzzle him. You can't use Trump though. So maybe use little Marco to soften the message, because and you can't use the vice president because ostensibly he's been against this, and that's why he's been ostracized. It's scary doings. I personally think that when the economy goes sour, our economy goes sour, Taco will come in, Trump will chicken out, and then look for an off ramp. And I think one of the off ramps that are there for him, because he's got an upcoming summit with China, is utilize China as a third party to negotiate out of this mess.
Well, I mean, I remember last week when we recorded, Doctor especially, you were talking about how, and you brought it up today, the Ayatollah represented this evil theocratic regime. They had to go. I'm not gonna shed any tears over the Ayatollah, trust me. But according to reports, the Defense Department, military leaders have been saying to American servicemen since the beginning of this, service personnel since the beginning of this operation in Iran, things like Donald Trump was appointed by God to initiate the final days and bring about the imminent return of Jesus Christ. What else did they say here? Well, that the end times are coming. I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider set on him was death, and hell followed with him. That sounds like the words of a theocracy to me more than a democracy. So where do we put that in this whole situation?
Well, first to address the issue of the goals, initially Trump said the goal was regime change, but very quickly he pivoted to degrading Iran. So the goals are kind of flexible as long as, but one thing they always said, and I hope they go for it, is never to put any boots on the ground. And, obviously I would be happiest if there was a regime change, even if it was for a secular dictator. But if there was not a regime change, I still would be happy if they just kind of pulverized their capacity to develop nuclear weapons and the ballistic missiles program. And they are planning on about 4 weeks of air raids, with increasing intensity, and they have all the targets. And Israel in particular, because for them it's existential, since Iran is just like Hamas, are dedicated to wiping them out from the map of the world. So they have infiltrated Iran and have a lot of intelligence. So I think I would be quite happy with the goal of the regime just being basically emasculated as much as possible. So as far as this, what you just said about this kind of apocalyptic message, I never heard that. And obviously, if anybody said it to the servicemen, that should be investigated and, certainly, discredited.
But they won't be investigated because it's what Pete Hegseth believes.
Well,
He's
if
made
you
that
believe
clear.
it, then, but Hegseth obviously is very unqualified to be in the position where he is. But that does not take away, in my mind, from the goal of neutering Iran, just like they should have neutered Hitler when he was arming himself, during the Weimar period.
Yeah.
It stems from the top. You have the commander in chief who basically, when confronted with casualties, lapsed into talking about the curtains behind him. Or in the middle of the night, while this travesty of a war is going on, he's basically waxing poetically online about what Melania looked like 20 years ago. This man is unstable. Not only is he unstable, he was interviewed and talked about his mother, who was a British citizen, and saying that his father, Fred, was born in England, and he wasn't.
No, he said he was born in Germany, but he wasn't. He was born in New York.
His grandfather was born in Germany.
Yeah.
The father was born in the United States.
Yeah, but Trump said that his father was born in Germany, which he was not.
No, this guy's so far removed from reality. To me, this smacks of basically the movie that came out in '64 about loving the bomb. Dr. Strangelove. Think about it. Think about the parallels between that movie and this. Only this is sadly real.
Well, Bill, I'm looking at your window behind you. Are there curtains on that window?
No curtains. No,
because Trump said also the other day that he saved curtains, that curtains wouldn't exist anymore if it wasn't for him. So,
this would be hysterical.
Christmas and curtains we only have because of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I think we should appreciate that.
Well, Bill made a good point, though. Trump can't stay on point. He can't. All right. During that same news conference when he was with the German chancellor, somehow we got onto windmills in the North Sea.
Uh-huh.
And, it's sad. But I don't think, and I'm going to see, I've kind of part company a little bit with Bill on this. I don't think Trump is deranged. I think he suffers from attention deficit disorder, but I don't think he's deranged. He's a bad guy. All right. All of us don't. In our group here, we all don't like him, and rightfully so. But to get back to what we were talking about as far as Iran and what's going to happen, and that's really what I'm curious about, what we all think about. What do we think is going to happen? I don't think that we should be looking for a democracy in Iran. I think this constant talk of America looking for the establishment of democracies, that's a very lofty goal. But you know what? Who cares?
Well, I think also
I don't care. I don't care one bit whether there's a democracy in Iran or in Venezuela. I don't care, as long as they are not a threat to us.
Also, I think
that's what it's all about.
That's not I don't think Donald Trump cares about that either.
I think you're right.
I think I
No.
think and again, think of this what you will. I think that's something George W. Bush genuinely cared about. Maybe not some of the people around him, but I think that's something that genuinely motivated him, is that he thought spreading democracy, making the world safe for democracy was a good thing. I don't think Donald Trump gives, a moment of thought to that idea. So
Well, then
Why-
Donald Trump and I agree on that.
there you go. We're
Okay.
building bridges here.
All
There
right.
was a famous politician, and maybe one of you guys know who it was. He said about a dictator, he said, he's an SOB, but he's our SOB.
SOB. Right.
I thought Ed was going to say he doesn't give a rat's ass.
No.
But, but again, that comes back to what I was saying earlier, that even if there is no democracy, we need Iran not to export terrorism and be a danger to others. And if they develop a nuclear bomb, that's going to be a danger to everybody. And if you have an apocalyptic regime who believes in martyrdom, they would not mind using it. Somebody like Kim Jong-un probably wouldn't use it because his interest is in staying in power. But if somebody's interest is spreading Islam and killing all the infidels, and for that they will be rewarded in heaven with the 72 virgins or however many, then that's much more of a threat. So even if it is like a dictator there who is a military type of a person, that's better than what we have now.
Michael, you're conjuring up images of medieval times and the Crusades. I mean, so we're marching in with nice crosses on our chest, our soldiers.
Now, look at the pictures from Iran. I mean, these ayatollahs are wearing medieval clothing, and so are the women. They're all in hijabs.
We had an opportunity in the 50s. We toppled the Democratic elected leader of Iran, our CIA. We did that. The Dulles brothers did that. Eisenhower, smiley face, did that. Why do you think the revolution came in 1979? We don't study history, and Trump has no conception of it. There are lessons to learn, or these we continue to repeat failures.
All of that is true. This what was his name, Mohammed
Mossadegh.
But that times have gone. But now we were in a situation where Iran was presenting a major threat. So you have to neutralize.
If we were cognizant of history, we wouldn't repeat the same issue, the same mistake.
So Bill, it's safe to say the Shah's son who's hanging around the suburbs of Maryland doesn't get your vote to take over?
Do you think he's going to set foot in that wasteland right now? No one all thinks they're safe. He'll go back there and they'll probably be killed.
Not when Israel is saying they're going to kill whoever takes over, which they announced the other day.
That's maybe the driver of American foreign policy, Bibi Netanyahu. So it's sad. I think Trump has already stated that he acted because he was afraid that Israel was going to react, and he wanted to be the one to do it.
Well, I want to come back to because the judge did pose a question to all of us of what we think is going to happen. And I think it was the doctor who said this earlier. Best case scenario, I think, is some kind of general takes over the government and puts on his own dictatorship that's maybe not as ideological and fundamentalist Islamic. I think that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is we get an Ayatollah who's even more extreme, an even more extreme religious bigot. I don't know which way it's gonna play out, but I think those are the two potential outcomes that we're looking at. If it's me looking at the situation, we're not getting democracy in Iran.
No, and I agree. I agree with you, Joe. That's my thought about what could happen.
But is it a general from the traditional Iranian army or from the Republican Guard? I mean, because that's different too. I mean, if you're getting one of these ideological generals from the Republican Guard, that's not much different from having the guys that we've had there.
I don't think that was ever an objective of the Trump administration to bring democracy there. I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
They would prefer to have a dictator because an American dictator would probably relate better to an Iranian dictator.
So, see, I think there is another possibility, other than those two, which I agree with. There is another possibility, which is a civil war, because Iran only has about 60% are Persians, and the rest are various minorities, like the Kurds,
Right.
the Baluchis, the Azaris, there are some
And
Arabs. So, and they all have their own national aspirations. So that's another possibility. But
that's something I wanted to bring up because there was a story that we are arming the Kurds. Now we did that in Iraq to fight against Saddam Hussein, of course, and I'm still one of those of the belief, as Joe Lieberman put forward in the Senate one time, that what we should have done when we took over Iraq was divided it into 3 countries.
Yeah,
But the Kurds have a country, the Sunnis have a country, and the Shiites have a country. I know you would have had to work out oil revenues and things with that, but I think that would have been the best outcome. And it's similar here in Iran. If we're gonna try to arm the Kurds, well, if we're arming the Kurds, they're fighting for an independent Kurdistan. So the outcome of that is we're gonna have increased sectarian violence and civil war in Iran. And
also in Iraq, because it borders...
And it'll spill over to Iraq. I mean, those are 2 countries that are majority Shiite in their religious identity. The Sunnis are a minority and the Kurds are a minority. And I think you brought up Saudi Arabia earlier. How does Saudi Arabia ultimately react? I know they're kind of sitting on the sideline right now, but they and Iran are traditional rivals for power in the Middle East. The Saudis being Sunni, the Iranian Ayatollah being a Shiite. I mean, if this kicks off all kinds of interdenominational violence in the Islamic world, Saudis aren't going to sit that out completely.
But I think a lot of it will depend what happens in the next week or 2. Because if Iran stops, if they're so degraded, they won't be able to shoot any missiles or drones, which is a possibility. Because Israel, I'm very happy with Israel being part of it, because they are I think they're better than us in terms of gathering intelligence and finding out where all these missile sites are. We have the firepower, but they have the intelligence, so it's a great combination. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm talking, obviously, trying to be optimistic, that if Iran, suddenly is no longer a threat, and they're right now the skies over Iran are open. They have no defense. So really the only thing they have are these drones. A lot of the missile launches have been destroyed. But if, let's say, in 2 weeks, they are no longer able to launch any drones, or very few, or sort of insignificant, then it will not become a regional war. But I think you are right that if they are not severely degraded, and if they can still launch missiles and drones, it might end up the way you said.
Well, I think also we have the capability to bomb any country we want into submission. I mean, the U.S. can do that. I know they're talking about stockpile shortages and all, but the U.S. has that military capacity, that military firepower. But I just want to talk briefly here about whether this is something that we should be doing, right? We're kidnapping the president of Venezuela. We're killing the supreme leader of Iran. Shouldn't the post-World War II order be built on the idea that you don't do things like that? Because if you do it to other countries, it means it's okay for other countries to do it also?
Well, also, too, we've forsaken our natural allies in Europe who are basically rebuffing Trump, i.e. Spain and Great Britain, with decent reason. It's like for 80 years, NATO basically kept the peace in Europe, and that seems to be up in smoke. It's not a priority of this government. This government basically sees 3 spheres of influence, and those spheres are Russia itself and China. And sadly, Russia doesn't even belong in the equation. They're not an economic power, number one. Militarily, they've been embarrassed by the Ukrainian efforts against them. That war drags on longer than it took the Soviets to chase the Nazis out. So it's that's the worldview of our current leadership. The only way that gets basically changed is by the will of the American people. And when gas right now is up to $3.11, up from $2.90s, and it's only going to get higher.
By May in a week, it's gone from $2.61 to $3.09.
Yeah, it's $3.11. The average price is now. I checked before we went on. I think that's what's going to basically deter the United States from putting boots on the ground and continue to prosecute this war. Because once it hits the American pocketbooks, then things happen. And I think you'll see a lot more MAGA people voice their opinions and maybe push for a vote in the Congress to kind of neuter the war efforts.
Yeah, but Billy, the Congress today, the House of Representatives, apparently, I heard, is going to take a vote, perhaps, on the War Powers Act, and it appears that vote's going to go down, and it happened in the Senate yesterday. There's a lot of division here in this country about this situation. I know you see polling where it says 59% of the people in our country disapprove of the action in Iran. And I think that's probably correct, but it's very nuanced, this situation. It's not clear cut by any stretch of the imagination. And when you have Americans involved in war, the public feels an obligation in some part to support them, even if it might be a mistake. And politically, this is not, I think, so clear cut. But you also, Bill, I want to say this. You brought up Saudi Arabia or Saudi Arabia. The Saudis, I think, present the United States with a very big problem. The Saudis will stab you in the back. And I think they have stabbed the United States in the back a number of times. And in my mind, they can't be trusted. So it'd be nice if they helped us out, really helped us out. But they won't. Because like Bill said, they're afraid. They're afraid.
Well, not only will they stab you in the back, they'll chop you up like they did to Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
But
Exactly.
they subsidized bin Laden to keep terrorism out of the kingdom. And
Right.
That's part of the reason why most of those people on the hijacked planes were Saudis. And basically they were getting subsidized for terror. Just keep it away from the kingdom. It's they're not up. And when you have the chief negotiator for this, Jared Kushner, he's not biased. He took $2 billion from them.
Right. Absolutely right.
And what is he doing?
The Saudis now
doing negotiating that?
The Saudis now are completely existing due to bribery. That's exactly what they're doing.
I think every country does ultimately what's best for that country, or what do they think it's best. So you cannot 100% trust anybody, including the United States, because every country does what's best for them. So that's number one. But to go back to Joe and his question about not interfering in other countries' affairs, that's a really good question. But I would argue that, unfortunately, people have aggression. We are not all Mother Teresa's. Everybody has aggressive side to them, and so has humanity. So there are some regimes which are positively evil. So the question is, should we let them just be the way they are and be kind of evil, homicidal regimes, or should the righteous nations, at least the nations which have more liberal, kind of enlightened ideas, interfere up to a certain point? That's the question. And I would argue a regime like Iran presents threat to the whole world. So we have to interfere, even though we would rather do things peacefully. But that regime has not been willing to make any changes, despite all kinds of encouragement and diplomatic effort, because they are apocalyptic regime who is not interested in humanity or helping even their own people, but spreading radical Islam across the world, or at least the way they interpret radical Islam.
Well, I just think back to after the events in Venezuela over, the New Year's, a post that President Zelensky put up on his social media saying, as long as the United States is taking out evil dictators, I have a suggestion of one. And he posted a picture of Vladimir Putin.
And they would have done it if he didn't have the nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapon is what's saving him. There will be no question if Russia had no nuclear weapons, we would have helped Ukraine to the extent that we would have bombed Russia all over the place, probably appropriately. But he has the nuclear weapons, and that's the trump card that he possesses.
Oh, I think he has another Trump card also, but we're not going to go down that path right
now. It's funny. I want to comment on something that Eddie said before about the American people in war. Go back to Bush 1. Who was more popular after the first Gulf War? He had Bush 1 had 91% approval ratings, and he lost. He wasn't reelected.
A year later, he wasn't.
A year later, it was reminiscent of when the Brits deposed Churchill as prime minister.
Yep.
The American public is very fickle, but one thing it's not fickle about, it's the pocketbook. And you've stated that before. And I do believe that this is not going to be well for him. And Michael, for an atheist, I can't believe you use the word righteous and stuff. You sound like a true believer.
I'm not an atheist. I am more of a kind of deist, you would say.
Deist? Okay.
I think like our founding father.
You should talk to the holy man. Maybe he can get you to go to service.
Well, the goal of one of this podcast is to get everybody to say something that's completely contradictory to their belief system. So we have Bill on record praising the Cheney family. We have
one Cheney family, daughter. The other guy's a war criminal, and that's never. I mean, he went to his grave as such.
So we do have to start moving towards a close here because I have another class that's going to be coming in a few minutes. But I want to go around for everybody's final thoughts on this situation. And Bill, I'll start with you.
Well, a man that I admire historically said once, "Never fear to negotiate, but never negotiate from fear." And that was JFK, the man who solved one of the most existential crises in American history. And I think we missed that boat. If we had competent diplomacy or competent diplomats or true competent leadership, which we don't have.
Doctor?
Well, I'm just waiting to see what happens, and I'm praying and hoping, depending on whether I have the deist part in me or the atheist part in me, that, we will degrade Iran to the point that there will no longer be a threat and we will be able to exit and things will go back to a former situation. And then, of course, if the regime in Iran does not change, Israel, I'm sure it's going to be watching them like hawks. And if they start digging, facilities again or developing missiles, if the regime stays, which is very likely, they will bomb them immediately before they can progress. So that's what I am hoping for. And I'm kind of dreading if this war kind of becomes forever war, and especially if there were going to be boots on the ground. And you don't have to apologize about the debt situation, because that the more the war goes on, the bigger the debt. So these things are kind of tied in.
I thought wars were supposed to be good for the economy, but to use a joke from the show MASH, whatever happened to all my shares of Gestapo? Judge?
Well, I hope that I'm wrong, but I think that this might go on longer than we think. And a concern of mine is that however this comes to an end, this chapter is replicated in the future, because we hear once again that the Iranians are on the verge of some sort of nuclear capability or on the verge of a ballistic missile system. And we have to go through this. We already supposedly obliterated their capacity for nuclear weapons. All right. And now we have to do it again. And I hope we don't have to do it again. So I'm a little pessimistic about what's going to happen with the government in Iran vis-a-vis affecting us. So we'll see.
Well, I not to be too flippant, but I think whether we have to do it again is going to depend on what continues to come out from the Epstein files, because notice that's been removed from the news a little bit the last few days. Trump was also talking the night before we hit Iran, was talking about bombing Cuba or taking over Cuba in some way. So we'll see what happens with regard to that country, because so far we've seen him talk about Venezuela. He went and kidnapped the president of Venezuela. We've seen him talk about Iran a little bit. He went and bombed Iran. I don't know what happened with Greenland. I guess the Danes are behaving themselves all of a sudden. I continue to be just horrified as a kind of conservative constitutionalist at the obsequiousness of our Congress and their refusal in any way to assert their own authority. We saw that in the vote about the war powers. I mean, it would have been a purely symbolic vote essentially anyway, to just say, no, you shouldn't have done this. And still they voted to go along with it. And I'm not sure. I have friends in Pennsylvania. Some of them are listeners to this show. The fact that John Fetterman voted with all the Republicans on that one to say okay to it. I mean, he might as well just become a Republican. John Fetterman, be the latest Arlen Specter and switch parties and betray the people of Pennsylvania. But I continue to watch that. The just hopelessness of our Congress to do anything, honestly. They subpoenaed Pam Bondi. I'm looking forward to see that, because Pam Bondi talking in front of Congress has been quite a show recently. See what she says there. But listeners out there, there's a lot going on. Obviously, we focused a lot on Iran today, rightfully so. But any stories that you're following out there, reach out to us with your thoughts, including on Iran, what you think is going to happen. I know we have people who are either in the military or have relatives in the military who listen to this. So we'd especially like to hear your thoughts on what's going on. Don't worry, you could be anonymous if we ever share your thoughts. Reach out to us as always at Wigs for Wigs. That is WIGSFORWHIGS at gmail.com. We do love hearing from you. Your thoughts could influence a future episode. But as always, keep following the news, stay informed, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Wigs for Wigs. Take care, everybody. The views expressed in Wigs for Wigs are purely those of the individual speakers and are not meant in any way to represent the views of any places of employment or other organizations.